Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anthony Marr. I'm the first speaker in the animal protection law subject. And I had 2 hours sleep 2 nights before, 3 hours last night, and 4 hours the night before. So all added up maybe 8 hours in 3 days. So if I lose track, you know why. The way that I want to do this is to set a framework of the global animal protection law, and starting right from the top to the small jurisdictions. So the top one is international agreements. International agreements is an overriding umbrella that sort of generally cover all the nations that belong to the United Nations, and all the countries are expected to abide by the international agreements. And there are quite a few international agreements, and let me just give you the most prominent several. The first one is OIE, which is the World Organization of Animal Health, which covers transportation, both sea and land, and covers slaughter for human consumption as well as for disease control. CITES, everybody knows about CITES, Convention on the Trade of Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. And that is one of the most important international agreements ever. That governs endangered species and threatened species. For example, when you say CITES 1, that means it is endangered. CITES 2 is threatened, and so on. And all countries have to abide by CITES law rules. CITES rules, one of the most prominent, is that you cannot trade, import or export endangered species. So every country has to abide by that. For example, in Canada, when it first started campaigning, Canada had to abide by CITES, and therefore endangered species parts like tiger bone, tiger penis, rhino horn, bear gallbladder, are all forbidden to be imported into Canada, but then it depends on the animal protection law within Canada, and at that point there was no animal protection law that forbids the sale of these endangered species products. So it is a very ludicrous situation. Canada is saying to the world, I don't allow you to import these products, but if you can smuggle it through our customs, we'll let you sell it openly in Canada. So that was my first campaign. And Ramsar has to do with the protection of wetlands habitat throughout the world. The World Heritage Convention covers both natural and cultural world heritages of extraordinary value, however they define that. So that covers both natural and cultural treasures of the world, and all nations have to abide by that and honor these treasures. Another one is the Bonn Convention, which governs our treatment of migratory species, and IATA, which is the International Air Transport Convention, sets rules and regulations as to how you can or cannot transport animals by air. And of course, everybody knows the International Whaling Commission, which originally was to regulate the industry of whaling, and now it has gradually evolved into a whale protection organization. So all these are international agreements, the most prominent ones of them all, and all nations have to abide by that belong to the United Nations. And then, now I move down one level onto the multinational coalitions. And one of the most prominent one, of course, is the European Union, which has, I believe, about 26 countries, I believe, or maybe, I don't know, 30 countries approximately. And the European Union has a history of gradual evolution and development of animal protection. In 1949, the Council of Europe was formed. At that point, it was formed right after the Second World War, so it was formed to cover human rights. And eventually, it gradually incorporated not animal rights, but animal welfare, and then environmental protection. And in terms of animal welfare, it covers pets, covers experimentation, covers farm, covers transportation, and covers animal slaughter. And the environmental part is quite complex, so I'm not going to go into that. So that was 1949. In 1951, the Treaty of Rome began to incorporate animal welfare into its construct. However, at that point, they referred to the animals as goods and as agricultural products. So at that point, it was pretty primitive. And then about 23 years later, the Bonn Convention, the Bonn Treaty, began to cover wildlife and wildlife habitat protection, which is a huge step forward in the EU. And then also the Convention on Civil Liberties, which either limits or sets guidelines to the damages that individuals and corporations will be liable for damages to the environment. And both of these, the Bonn Treaty and the Convention on Civil Liberties, are all applicable to the various countries, and the various countries then will write laws based upon that, and they would become national law. So these two. And then in 1990, the European Coalition to End Animal Experimentation came into being, and that was another big leap forward by the Europeans, which we North Americans are medievally behind. And it also, and this, okay, already? I've barely begun. Allow me 15, okay, thanks. And the European, so I've done that. So in 1992, the Maastricht Treaty concentrated on animal welfare, and that covers research, covers transportation, covers agricultural practices, and covers internal markets within the EU. In 1993, the European Coalition for Farm Animals, which included 31 organizations of 25 countries plus Israel, to end Europe-wide factory farming and long-distance transportation. So once again, Europe is light years ahead of us. And that was in 1993. In 1997, the Amsterdam Treaty, or otherwise called the European Union Treaty, covers about the same grounds, but it made even further inroads into animal welfare requirements. And unfortunately, it has a get-out clause, which is a horrible exit for abusers, because it allows animal abuse based upon cultural and religious requirements. So you know what that means. Yeah. The European Court of Justice is another huge advance, and it has three components. It has, number one is regulations, which overrides national laws. Number two is decisions, which are binding on all EU countries. And directives, which leaves methods of implementation to the national governments, and which eventually becomes national law. So this is how Europe works. In terms of national, state, and regional legislation, A is constitution. Now, not all countries have written constitutions. For example, China right now does not have a written any part of animal protection in its constitution. However, China right now is trying to catch up, so it's drafting a new, modern animal protection set of laws which will ban dog killing, will ban cat-dog eating in China. So hopefully it will. And I speak with a certain amount of pride in that, because I'm of Chinese origin, even though I'm an expat and I'll never go back to China, but that's my own personal grudge. And now, if a country does not have animal rights rules and regulations written into their constitution, it is very dangerous, because then animal welfare and animal rights issues will be put under and overridden by other constitutional principles, such as scientific research and artistic expression, so-called. For example, in Canada, there were a couple of so-called artists who tortured a cat to death on video, and that was supposed to be art, and was displayed in a museum in Toronto. Thankfully, the